In a dim, foul-smelling room of a mental hospital, two nurses struggled to move the stiff, cold body of an old woman lying on a hospital bed. Her eyes were wide open, her mouth agape as if in shock. The only sounds were the uneven wheels of the bed and the distant clamor and sobs of a few mental patients locked in their rooms. The first nurse, unnerved, asked her colleague to close the old woman's eyes. The second nurse complied, gently closing the woman's eyes. However, as they moved the bed towards the elevator, the first nurse noticed the eyes had opened again. Despite their unease, they loaded the body into a hearse, brushing off their fear with rational explanations. But then, as they secured the body, the old woman suddenly rose. With a scream, she lunged at the nurses, biting into their necks, and the air filled with the sound of their desperate cries and the spray of blood. In another town, friends Tim and Mel were on a bus, asleep. Tim leaned on Mel's shoulder, drooling. Mel woke up, pushing Tim away with a groan. They exchanged playful banter, teasing each other about their cleanliness and intelligence. Arriving at the terminal, they stepped off the bus, looking for food. Tim and Mel had recently graduated from senior high school and, instead of going straight to college, decided to seek work in the city to save money. Hungry and exhausted, they sat down in front of a funeral home and morgue. Noticing a sign offering free food and accommodation, they decided to check it out, hoping to find some relief. Inside the funeral home, they encountered Robert, the embalmer. He asked if they were family members of the deceased, offering them his condolences. Robert, in need of helpers, offered them a job despite their lack of experience. Robert led them through a dimly lit hallway to a cold room filled with the scent of formalin. Tim and Mel, despite their fear, agreed to start their training immediately. Robert began examining a newly arrived body from the mental hospital. He found it strange that there was no cause of death listed. Mel nervously mentioned seeing the body's eyes move earlier, but Robert insisted she was dead. They proceeded with the embalming process, Mel struggling not to gag. Afterward, they stored the body in a freezer cabinet. Later that night, over dinner, Robert made a joke about cooking the meat of unclaimed bodies, unsettling Tim and Mel. He assured them they needed to get used to such things. Tim and Mel decided to call it a day and went to their shared room on the second floor of the funeral home. The room was dimly lit with two single beds. Around midnight, Mel needed to go to the bathroom and, feeling uneasy, asked Tim to accompany him. Tim refused, so Mel went alone, feeling chills as he descended the stairs. In the bathroom, Mel heard knocking and assumed it was Tim playing a prank. But when he opened the door, no one was there. He checked the kitchen, hoping to find Robert, but instead saw the freezer cabinet slightly open, the old woman's head peeking out. Terrified, he pushed the cabinet shut and noticed a shadowy figure of the old woman standing in front of him. He ran, feeling her cold hands grab his jacket. He escaped by slipping out of the jacket and fled upstairs. Mel's screams woke Tim, who dismissed his friend's fears as dramatics. They returned to the morgue, finding everything in place, including Mel's jacket on top of the deceased woman. Tim, jokingly accusing Mel of trying to warm the body, returned the jacket, which Mel immediately discarded. Tim woke up feeling someone hugging him. Removing the blanket, he found no one. He asked Mel, who was sound asleep, if he was awake. Disturbed, Tim started praying, trying to shake off his fear, and eventually closed his eyes again. The next day, Tim found Robert already making coffee in the kitchen. Mel, tired from lack of sleep, discovered his discarded jacket at the foot of his bed, accusing Tim of playing tricks. Robert revealed 2 red marks on his neck, feeling weak. A storm approached, darkening the sky. Robert, needing to return to his province, instructed Tim and Mel to watch over the place. Suddenly, the power went out. They scrambled to find candles, feeling an increasing sense of dread. A loud thud from the morgue startled them. Armed with makeshift weapons, they cautiously approached, finding the old woman's body missing. The body attacked them, biting Mel's neck. Tim tried to defend them but was overpowered. The old woman, reveling in their blood, left both lifeless. The next morning, Robert returned to find the funeral home eerily silent. Inside, he saw the aftermath of the horror that had transpired. Noticing the red marks on his neck, feeling weaker, he decided to seek help. Robert entered a dimly lit hut where an old shaman sat surrounded by herbs and talismans. The shaman revealed that the bites on Robert's neck were done by the old witch to regain her strength. Robert, desperate for a solution, asked what they could do. The shaman instructed Robert to gather the boys' bodies and perform a ritual to fight the witch. Together, they returned to the funeral home, where the shaman began the ritual, laying out protective herbs and lighting candles around the bodies. As the ritual commenced, a cold wind swept through the room, extinguishing some candles. The old woman's ghostly form appeared, eyes glowing with malevolence. She lunged at Robert, but an invisible barrier formed by the circle of candles and herbs repelled her. The shaman's chants grew stronger, forcing the old woman's spirit back. With a final ear-piercing scream, the old woman was sucked back into the netherworld, and the room fell silent. The shaman instructed Robert to bury the body in sacred ground and perform a cleansing ritual to purify the funeral home. Robert and the shaman carried the old woman's body to a remote, sacred clearing in the forest. They dug a deep grave, lined it with protective herbs, and laid her body to rest. The shaman performed a final blessing over the grave, ensuring the witch would harm the living no more. Back at the funeral home, Robert and the shaman performed a cleansing ritual, burning incense and sprinkling holy water in every corner. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, replaced by a sense of calm and peace. The shaman reminded Robert that the fight against evil is never truly over, urging him to stay vigilant and protect the place. Robert, feeling a sense of relief and determination, nodded. Life returned to normal at the funeral home. Robert continued his work with a renewed sense of purpose and caution. He honored the memory of Tim and Mel, ensuring their final resting place was peaceful.